Have you ever just felt something you couldn't explain, like a presence or an energy? Well, today we're taking a deep dive into spirituality, specifically the experiences of Malumir Logan, who has a unique perspective on, well, what lies beyond our senses.
Yeah, it's really interesting how some people seem to hold on to that childlike wonder, that sensitivity to things we can't see, It's like, as we grow up, most of us lose that. But Malumir, she never really did. Like, she saw auras around plants and trees as a kid, thought it was totally normal.
Whoa, can you imagine looking at a tree and seeing this, radiant glow, not just the branches and leaves, but an actual aura?
Mm-hmm.
That says a lot about how she sees the world.
Exactly. It points to a heightened sensitivity to energy, which a lot of people connect with intuition and those kinds of abilities. And it wasn't just auras with her. Even at a young age, she could just tell what people were feeling almost instantly, like a human lie detector.
Wow. To be able to perceive emotions that clearly, it can't just be about reading body language, right?
Right. It wasn't about analyzing cues or anything like that. She was tapping into something deeper, a deeper layer of perception, which, some might call intuition. And this ability to sense energy, it gets even more intriguing when we think about how life's challenges can actually act as catalysts. They can awaken these dormant abilities.
So you're talking about that period when things were pretty tough for Malumir, financial strain, relationships ending. It felt like everything was falling apart.
Yeah, those moments of crisis, they can really push us, force us to face the bigger questions, search for meaning beyond our immediate problems. Malumir talks about this one pivotal experience during that time, like a sign from the universe.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more.
So she's feeling completely overwhelmed, driving on the verge of making a huge decision.
This is where things take a turn, right?
You could say that. As she's wrestling with all this intense emotion, the northern lights just erupt over her town, and apparently they're rarely seen there.
Whoa, talk about a sign. Like the universe saying, hold on, there's more to this. I mean, do you think we can really chalk that up to coincidence? Or is it more like synchronicity?
Well, synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences, they pop up a lot in stories about spiritual awakenings. These events, they kind of shake us up, make us question what we thought we knew about how the world works. They make us ask, are we just along for the ride? Or do our thoughts and feelings actually have an impact on our reality?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, if we're open to that possibility, to synchronicity, what other subtle signs are we missing in our own lives?
That's a question worth exploring. But for now, let's switch gears a bit and dive into another pretty extraordinary event in Malumir's life. This one suggests a connection to, realms beyond our own. So a friend's father had passed away, and Malumir felt drawn to the wake, even though she wasn't that close to the family.
It's interesting how that works, that sense of knowing, being pulled toward something without a logical explanation.
Yeah.
So what happened at the wake?
Okay, so that morning during her meditation, Malumir has this vivid encounter with a man. She doesn't recognize him, and his presence kind of unsettled her. But she couldn't shake this feeling that he was important somehow.
This is where it gets really interesting. She goes to the wake, and
she sees him, the man from her meditation, and it turns out to be her friend's father, the one who passed away.
Wow. Okay, no way that's just a coincidence. So she's seeing this man, first while she's meditating, and then again, in person. What does that tell us about, how we perceive things, that connection to people who've passed on?
Yeah, it really makes you think about the possibility of communication that goes beyond what we can see and hear, beyond the physical. People talk about clairaudience, like hearing messages, or clairvoyance, which is like having visions or seeing mental images. These experiences suggest that our senses, the way we usually think of them, they might just be a tiny part of what's actually possible.
So it's not so much about seeing ghosts, like in the movies, but more about receiving information in ways we don't fully understand. Was there a message from her friend's father?
There was. He wanted to express his love for his son, said he wished he'd said it more when he was alive. Can you imagine the weight of that encounter? Malumir, suddenly she's a messenger, a bridge between worlds. That's a lot to process.
It really is. It makes you think about all those things left unsaid. And it's a huge responsibility, too. How did she handle all that?
It wasn't easy. She talks about feeling like a conduit, which is amazing, but also kind of overwhelming, especially since she was still figuring out her own, spiritual experiences. And this whole thing, as profound as it was, it really showed her the importance of discernment.
Discernment, yeah. How do we know what to trust, who to trust, when we're dealing with these, less familiar ways of perceiving things?
It's a process. Learning to recognize different energies, understanding that not every spiritual encounter is a positive one. It's like in our everyday lives, we choose who we let into our circle, right? Setting boundaries to protect ourselves. It's the same in the spiritual realm.
Right. It's about being mindful, not closed off.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all like perfectly clear communication with her friend's father.
No, not exactly. She described him as having a very, how do I put this? A very forceful personality. And later, her friend confirmed it.
So even in the afterlife, our personalities stick around. I guess that adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Absolutely. And for Malumir, it made her reevaluate her own boundaries, how comfortable she felt with that kind of, mediumship work. She decided to step back from it, realize that not every spiritual ability has to be like a lifelong path.
That's such an important point. We don't have to force ourselves into roles that don't feel right. Authenticity is key, right?
100%. We get to choose how we engage with spirituality, what feels empowering. And speaking of which, Malumir's connection with her own ancestors, that plays a big role in her practice.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that earlier. Her connection with her grandfather, even before she'd seen his picture, that's incredible.
It really shows how strong those family bonds can be, even beyond physical limitations. Ancestor work, honoring those who came before us, it's a common thread in lots of spiritual traditions.
It's a good reminder that we're not alone, that we carry the stories and the energy of our ancestors. How can we learn to tap into that sense of connection to something bigger?
It starts with acknowledging that our ancestors are still with us, in a way. Their influence shapes who we are. Ancestor work can be as simple as learning about our family history, saying their names with respect, maybe creating a little altar.
It's about keeping those memories alive.
Exactly. And Malumir's work with tarot, it's another way to explore those connections. But it's not about fortune telling, right?
From what I understand, she uses it more for self-reflection, a way to access inner wisdom, sort of like tapping into that ancestral knowledge we're talking about. How does that work? It really is amazing how tarot can connect us to both our inner selves and the wisdom of those who came before us. Makes you think about all the different ways there are to experience the world.
That's an interesting point. Malumir talks about this potential link between neurodiversity and spirituality. She's noticed a lot of people drawn to this kind of exploration. They identify as neurodivergent.
That's fascinating to me. As someone who's neurodivergent myself, I can definitely relate to that. What do you think is behind that connection?
Well, there's not a ton of research on it yet, but Malumir's theory is that the same things that can make it tough to navigate a, neurotypical world, like being extra sensitive, thinking differently, questioning norms, those things might also make someone more open to spiritual experiences.
Like having a different way of tuning in, picking up on things that others might miss.
Mm-hmm.
If you're wired for sensitivity, it makes sense you might be more open to those subtle energies, maybe even perceive things beyond the five senses more easily.
Exactly. It really highlights how diverse human experience is and how our differences, they're not deficits, they're actually strengths, unique ways of seeing things. And it shows how important it is to create spiritual communities that are truly inclusive, where everyone feels welcome and supported.
Speaking of support, Malumir emphasizes having good boundaries, being discerning, especially for people who are more sensitive to energy. Why is that so important?
Imagine being highly attuned to emotions, to energy, feeling it all really intensely. Without clear boundaries, it would be easy to get overwhelmed, take on other people's stuff, Discernment helps you navigate that, figure out which energies are good for you and which ones drain you.
Like having a spiritual immune system, being able to tell the difference between what helps you and what doesn't. So what's her advice for cultivating that discernment, for navigating all this?
She's big on grounding practices, connecting with nature, and setting really clear intentions, like what kind of energy do you want to invite into your life? It's also about learning to trust your gut, that inner voice that tells you if something feels right or not.
It's empowering, knowing we have a choice in this. We're not just along for the ride. We can decide what we connect with, create healthy boundaries, build a practice that truly serves us.
Exactly. And Malumir's story really shows that. She took these experiences, seeing auras, feeling emotions, connecting with her ancestors, and created a life of purpose, helping others find their own way.
It reminds us that our stories matter, that our sensitivity is a gift, and that there's no one right way to approach spirituality. Whether we relate to Malumir's journey specifically or not, her emphasis on knowing ourselves, listening to our intuition, and honoring our own paths, that's something we can all take with us.
Absolutely. If there's one big takeaway from all of this, it's that we all have the potential to explore, to pay attention to those little intuitive nudges, and approach life's mysteries with curiosity. You never know what you might discover.
Well, this has been quite a journey, a real deep dive into the world of auras, intuitive insights, and the amazing connections we have with those who came before us. And as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this. Think about the unseen forces that might be at play in your own life. Have you noticed any synchronicities, moments of knowing that you might have brushed off? The answers, much like the world of energy itself, just might surprise you.